worked at a gas station, and they usually only ever had one person closing the store unless there was a trainee. One night, I was scheduled to close at 11 p.m. There was a big window by the register lottery area, so we could see the gas pumps at all times. I was counting money and looked up to see a car pull up to a pump. I ignored it because the register was closed out and I had the door locked. I looked back up again a minute later to a guy just standing there looking at me. Made me jump, but he pointed to the door. I shook my head no and mouthed the word closed. He started getting frustrated and huffed and walked away, like most people did. I figured he would just drive away and find somewhere else for gas. I usually try to watch to make sure people drive away when they get huffy like that, just in case they try to do any damage in their frustrated and angry state, so I could at least grab a license plate number as they drove off. I watched him walk back to his car and open the driver's door like he was going to get in, but instead came right back out, came up to the front doors, and started pacing around, kicking the trash can next to the door, and stopping every now and then to bang his fist on the door and yell at me incoherently through it. He was obviously much angrier than I had previously thought he was. For a second, I thought, what the heck is this guy doing? Then it hit me. He probably had a weapon of some kind. Very possible it was a gun since I live in Texas, and was waiting for me to come out. At the time, I was about 6 months pregnant with my son. All I could think about was the safety of my unborn child with this guy blocking my only exit from the building. I got on my knees behind the counter and just peeked over the top to see what if this guy did anything. I got lucky when one of the police officers in town decided to pull into our parking lot. Since our store was open the latest in town, and our staff was mostly comprised of young women, they would sometimes come around a bit after closing to make sure no trouble happened. This guy saw the cop car and made a tactical retreat back to his vehicle and finally drove away. I got up, finished counting the money, and quickly left. I told the cop what had happened, but nothing ever came of it because the guy was from out of town. I had been too panicked to get a plate number, and the cameras hadn't been able to get a number either. I don't actually know if that guy had a weapon on him because I didn't actually see one, but it was definitely scary because even if he didn't, he could have easily just beat me with his fists. This story didn't happen to me per se, but to my father. So, my dad had a weird experience once when he was in his early 20s. He had an office job in a corporate building in the city. The building had 5 floors, and his office was on the 4th. He had just got a promotion when this incident happened, and unfortunately, he had to stay late a lot of nights to finish his work. One evening, he was staying late and finally finished his work around 11 p.m. He locked up the office, headed downstairs, said goodbye to the security guard, and left. The next day, he came in, and to his horror, he found out that the building had been broken into. The police were on site at the time, and as if they were waiting on his arrival, they took my dad to the side and began questioning him. He told them about staying late and how he definitely locked up and everything. Then my dad asked about the security guard on site and where the guard was at during all this. The cop gave him a strange look, and then one of the officers went and got my dad's boss, who came over and asked my dad what he was talking about. The cop asked the boss if the building had a security guard, and the boss shook his head and said that they used to. But the security guard had sadly passed away a week ago, and they hadn't hired another one yet. My dad was utterly shocked and couldn't grasp the reality of what he just heard. He could have sworn having spoken to the security guard downstairs before he exited the building that night. My father was completely in the dark, heartbreakingly unaware that the security guard had passed away. Like, not a whisper, nor a word had reached him at the office about it. Yet, he could clearly recall the last time they spoke, like someone just pressed play on a memory. Also, the person who had broken into the building ended up being a disgruntled former employee who had been fired a couple of months prior. He had confessed to the police that he chose that particular time to break in because he knew the security guard had just passed away, so it would be easy to just break in without worrying about being caught. Again, my dad said the guard was very real looking, not hazy in any way. The guard looked how he always looked and seemed genuinely content. To think about, this story still gives me the chills, even till today. I work as a construction worker. One time, we had a late night finishing up the supports for the building we were building. One by one, the streetlights went on as the sun set under the horizon. We were casually joking that we would be extras in a horror movie filmed nearby. A little while later, just as my buddies were leaving, the streetlights went off and the work lights wouldn't turn on. The joking was over because this was starting to get kind of creepy. The three of us left, huddled together, as we saw a man in a long hoodie standing at the supports. We had finished. His hood was up, and there was a shadow on his face, so we couldn't see his face besides the lips. He silently whispered, "Better look out," just moments before the ground beneath us gave way to a sinkhole in the street. The sinkhole wasn't too far down, so we didn't get seriously injured, but it was too high to climb out of safely. While we were testing the walls for good climbing spots, part of the wall crumbled into the sewer system, and we figured we could get out using a manhole. We carefully walked into the sewer under the road, but soon found that the manholes were somehow covered by something or wouldn't open, so we kept walking to find a better way out. Eventually, it led to a dead end for us because it was where the sidewalk ends, but the water goes through the bars. We turned around and saw that man in the hoodie again, but this time we had our phone flashlights out. We still couldn't see him though, because he was wearing a mask, the kind that covers your eyes too. In his hand was a chef knife. All the blood suddenly drained from my face, and I felt myself turn white. It was obvious the others were scared too. We couldn't call 911 because he would attack too fast, and we had no service down there. I screamed for help, but nothing happened. Not even my echo happened. He said in a deep voice, "Looks like your time is up, boys. You should have run when I told you to." And then lunged at us, nearly stabbing me, but I jumped to the side and only got a cut in the side. By now, we had all dropped our phones because we needed our hands, so I couldn't see who grabbed his knife hand and threw him in the sewage, but I'm happy it happened, and both of us probably still have the scars to prove it. We ran out of there as fast as we could, with me being a little slow. When we got back to the opening, it had probably been an hour, and people were there. They dropped a ladder down for us to climb up. After we told everyone what happened, and the police found and identified the man, we asked the cops about him. They said that he took too many drugs before going out to a bar with his girlfriend. At the bar, he got really drunk, and the girl broke up with him. He saw no more point in life and decided to search for victims before he committed suicide. We were really lucky to escape with minor injuries, but we still went to the hospital just in case. Prior to the pandemic, I worked at a cafe that was part of an old hotel. I would never say that I felt creeped out, so I don't chalk this up to any kind of feeling that might influence what I saw. Besides, I don't even have a strong belief in ghosts. Anyway, we have a front-of-house dining space and a back-of-house kitchen area. Next to the kitchen entrance, there is a hall that leads to the bathrooms and around to the hotel's front desk. It was a slow afternoon, so I went back to talk with the kitchen staff. I was leaning against the doorway, half in the kitchen, half in the hallway. I wasn't planning on staying long, so my attention was split between keeping an eye on the dining room and talking to people in the kitchen. While I'm talking, I register movement out of the corner of my eye, which seemingly involuntarily got me to look over my shoulder and quickly follow a gentleman as he walked past me down the hall. My attention quickly went back to looking into the kitchen, and then immediately back to the hall. But when I looked back, nobody was there. In my mind, I immediately felt like this was odd. I should have still seen someone either moving down the hall towards the hotel front desk, or would have seen one of the bathroom doors closing slowly because of the hydraulics. Since I saw neither, I felt compelled to investigate and rule out several possibilities while I had the opportunity to do so. So, I walked down the hall towards the front desk, nobody there, and opened both bathroom doors. Nobody inside. It is highly unlikely that someone of that age could have gotten out of the building without me seeing them at the time that I acted. They would have had to have started to full-on run to get through the lobby and out the door. And having worked in this space for more than 3 years, I have never encountered an adult that spontaneously decided to sprint to the door and run away. The weird thing about it is that the image in my mind of the man felt and feels more like an imprint, like it was memory as it happened, as opposed to me actually seeing it with my eyes, if that makes any sense. But it is so clear that it couldn't have simply been a light trick or shadow or whatever. I can still imagine a very clear person. I can say what they were wearing, how tall they were, and likely their average age, based on clothing, how they held themselves, and how they walked. It was one of the weirdest things I've encountered. I used to work at a family entertainment center that included a laser tag facility, among an arcade and other family fun things. Everyone always talked about the place being haunted, and I never believed it, because I don't typically believe in paranormal stuff. Until I started working in the laser tag facility. Now, if you've ever played laser tag, you know it's black lights. So of course, when the black and white lights are off, it's pitch black, like you can't even see your hand in front of your face. Of course, we don't play in the dark, but it is important to note. We worked alone at the laser tag section, and were responsible for explaining the rules in room 1, helping people get vested up in their gear in room 2, and then had to referee in the arena. So, there are 3 different sections to this part of the facility, as well as a small office where I spend a lot of time. The office was inside room 2, just across from the door that led to the arena. Also, the arena had back doors that led to the back of the parking lot. These doors always remained locked from the inside, but in case of emergency could be used. This will be important for a later incident. My first incident was my first night closing alone. One of the laser tag vests, which had been out of order all day and was 100% properly sitting on the rack, came flying up and over the rack, onto the floor, ripping the charger from it and causing the vest to kick on. That scared the hell out of me. The second incident was Halloween 2013. I was working with a coworker that night because it was busy. I was in the office checking vest battery levels while my coworker was outside running the register. There were no games going on, so all the rooms were empty. I heard what sounded like someone running up the ramp towards the vesting room, where the office is also located. And I looked at the door to the arena, fully expecting it to burst open and someone to run through. The footsteps stop, and it goes silent. Then there's a loud bang. I jumped and screamed and ran to get my coworker. He opened the door, and we found a shoe in the floor that definitely was not there before. Also, we never found the other one, so that still bothers me when I think about it. Another incident was one night. 2 of our regulars were at the facility for their bowling league. Their kids wanted to play laser tag. I don't remember their exact ages, but at the time, I'd say the girl was about 5 or 6, and the boy was probably 7 or 8. Just the 2 of them asked if I'd play too. I agreed, and we went into the arena to play. Midway through the game, the girl pops the corner, and I notice her vest is turned off, which can't happen unless it's done by the computer in the office. Then the music stops, so of course I flip and think the lights are going next. I was so sure someone was in the office who wasn't supposed to be. I ran out, threw the office door open, and the computer had crashed. Never happened before. I call the kids in to reset the game, and the little girl says she's scared and doesn't want to play again. I told them, okay, and that I would refund their parents. I was helping her get the laser tag vest off when she said, "Hey, I have a question." I asked what it was, and she said, "Who was the man in there playing with us?" There was no man in there. It was just me, 19 years old at the time, and the kids. I told her there wasn't anyone else in there, and she said yes, there was. She could show me. She grabs my hand, walks me to the door and opens it, points up on the ramp and says, "See, he's right there." I told her I didn't see anything, and she goes, "How can you not see him? His hair is glowing." I have had several unexplained events happen in the store, but that particular incident sent chills down my body till this day. I was working on a fairly large industrial building project for a power plant. My company was responsible for most of the scaffolding work on site. I was a quality control shift leader for around 50 guys at a time. One morning, I did my usual start of setting the guys on their allocated jobs, and at break, start walking to our lunchroom. On my way, I got a very panicked phone call from my project leader asking if I'm okay and my teams are. I said, as far as I know. I then proceeded and asked, "What's happened?" He tells me about a major accident, but he doesn't know any specifics as it just happened. I ran back to my site and saw its chaos. There are hundreds of workers crowding an area, So I make my way to the front to access the situation and talk to the health and safety team. As I reached them, I needed no explanation. A 40-ton metal element around 30 meters tall is smashed on the ground with a skylift bucket fully extended to around 20 meters up, tipped on its side, with 2 harness attachments still clipped, but no harnessed people at the end. Health and safety asked me to help with crowd control dispersal. Within 10 minutes, at least 5 ambulances, several fire engines, and 5 police cars showed up. I sorted out harnesses, as they weren't equipped to deal with the situation. I was informed that 2 people were already dead, but there was a third that was still alive up on one of the floors. Was told by paramedics that our scaffolding stairway was not wide enough to stretcher the man out. I pulled in a team to help me rebuild a wide staircase. Was asked to help stretcher the guy up the stairs, as they needed an extra set of hands, but warned me that I need a strong stomach. I will never, ever get the image of that poor man's face out of my head. Unfortunately, he didn't end up making it. Sadly, one of the deceased workers' mothers died of a heart attack when she was informed of the loss of her son's life. One of the other managers from my firm was with the 2 men who died on site, talking to them in their final moments as he spoke the same language. A terrible, horrific day I have spent every day trying to erase it from my memory. I have a story from about 1.5 years ago. I was working for an ambulance service, and from day 1, I would say weird things happened, like waking up to door slamming, waking up after thinking I heard someone say, "Wake up," like 2 inches from my face, and getting a call like a minute later. Certain parts of buildings having a weird feeling, stuff like that. I'm fairly skeptical, and I know weird stuff happens with sleep, so I can't really say too much about those things. This story is different though, because it was witnessed. It was winter and snowing. Me and the other medic had gone over to the ER to help with the trauma, and when we got back, we were both in the kitchen area, sitting, just shooting the letting the adrenaline off. Our part of the building was the 3rd floor of a long rectangular building with 1 long hallway and stairwells at both ends. So, as we are sitting there, we both hear boot steps walking up the stairs, getting louder as it gets to our floor, and then the door at the end of the hall opening and closing. We weren't sure who it was, but other people have keys to the building, so it wasn't that strange at first, although it was weird that anyone would be coming up at like 3 in the morning. Our building is separate from the main hospital, and it is a small facility, so not a lot of people around at night anyway. We kept talking, expecting to see someone walk by the room and down the hall, or have someone say something. Nothing. After a minute or 2, I poked my head out and looked down hall. No one was there. We didn't hear any other footsteps once the door had opened and closed. After a minute or so, we went down the stairs and looked out into the parking lot and out the door. No tire tracks and no shoe prints, as I said. It was snowing. We went to the other door, and none was there either. The incident definitely creeped us out. The building is old and has a lot of different things serving mostly hospital functions. As far as I know, no patient rooms were ever there. Certainly, people die in the ambulances and in the hospital, but I don't know of any other deaths in the building. I mentioned it to some of my coworkers the next day, and they said they had heard doors slamming. And one medic who used to be there swore a locked door on the sleeping room flew open in the middle of the night when he was there alone. Always hard to tell if EMS people are just messing with you, but it was definitely a weird, unexplained event. Deep within the expansive wilderness of Wyoming, far from the trappings of civilization, I held the title of squad boss. I was in charge of 5 members of a 20-person hand crew during a fire use wildland assignment. That day, our daunting mission was simple in its complexity. Navigate on foot for 10 to 15 miles to the core of the forest to keep a vigilant watch on the fire. Its unpredictable nature made it vital for us to ensure it remained away from the distant ranches. Our usual aerial transport, helicopters, were grounded due to treacherous gusts, forcing us to rely on our legs and navigate the dense wilderness. Alongside us, a separate 10-person crew journeyed from another angle towards the fire. Unlike us, they had mules for company, carrying their crucial equipment as they ventured through a large canyon. However, this choice came with its disadvantages. Their journey through the canyon meant we lost most of our radio communication with them. The canyon's vast walls and out-of-reach radio repeaters made any form of effective communication almost impossible, plunging them into a daunting silence. As the day progressed, my small squad found a strategic vantage point atop a ridge, with the fiery dance spread out below us. It was a sight to behold, the fire alive and unpredictable. As the hours trickled away, we maintained communication with the other squads, a small comfort in our isolated outpost. However, as 3 p.m. approached, the world as we knew it seemed to shift. An impending cold front brought with it ferocious winds, rampaging through at a startling 40 miles per hour. The atmosphere grew thick with dread as the smoke column, like an awakened beast, started its journey towards us. From past experiences, we knew that such atmospheric tantrums could lead to an explosive and unpredictable fire behavior. Without wasting a moment, we harnessed our adrenaline and in near panic raced towards our vehicles, the only semblance of safety. Meanwhile, the canyon-trapped 10-person crew faced a nightmare. Their fragmented and desperate radio transmissions painted a chilling tableau of their situation. With the fire encroaching, they made the harrowing decision to deploy their fire shelters. The ensuing hours were agonizing. With the helicopters still grounded and the fire's rage creating an impenetrable barrier, they remained unreachable. When we finally re-established radio contact, their head count was missing 1 soul. The weight of the silence was unbearable. Time, in its cruelty, seemed to stretch, but she was eventually found. She was alive and well, but there was some final destination attached to her. Earlier that summer, she had narrowly escaped death in a fire engine mishap. But as destiny would have it, she was sadly involved in a tragic helicopter crash later on. Now, as the ashes of the past settle, the haunting realization that it could have been any of us trapped in that inferno remains. We were really lucky that day. The memory is so strong, it's like a burn that never goes away, and we'll always remember it. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and early in my career, I worked at a residential mental health facility. One of our residents was an elective mute, which means that he couldn't talk, but there were no medical reasons as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life, and in fact, seemed quite normal back then, with the exception of being close to 7 feet tall. He'd been raised in the Deep South and joined the military when he was 19. But one night, he vanished. He was declared AWOL, and eventually, he was declared missing and dead. 10 years later, a 7-foot-tall man walked into a VA hospital emergency room in my part of the Midwest and said to the receptionist, "My name is Marion Duchesne, not the real name, and I've been dead for 10 years. Those were the last words he ever spoke. He was covered with dust, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reported to be wearing the night he vanished. His social security number had not been used, and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess, via fingerprints. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man, and that whoever was claiming to be him simply could not be. They demanded not to be contacted again. Marion paced all day, every day, moving his mouth that looked like talking or muttering, but no sound came out. He had an unnerving habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open, as if he were laughing heartily, but not even a breath could be heard. If I talked to him, he appeared to listen, periodically throwing his head back in that laughter-mimicking way of his. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either positively or negatively. Occupational therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin, and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again. On my last day at that job, the last thing I saw was Marion, pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to laugh. Later, I wondered if all along I'd been dealing with a ghost. All these years later, I still don't know. I have for many years worked in a boutique hotel in a small town in Wales. It is an old building, probably the oldest business in town, having been there for at least 100 years. It neighbors a castle, and evidence suggests some form of hostelry has been on the site since the inception of our town. Anyways, as I mention, it is a very old building and can be slightly spooky when you're left on your own to close up the business at break of day. Among the various things that you have to do to close up the bar is turning certain lights off around the business. It is a 3-story building. The second floor houses the hotel rooms. It is a bigger building than it appears on the exterior, with a great number of winding corridors. At the top of the stairs on the second floor is the ladies' toilet, which overlooks a function room. At the end of every night, among my duties revolves around turning the lights off in those toilets. It is a strange and eerie room, and to complete my task, it always goes the same way. I enter, turn off the first light, then the second. Then I run from the room with a cold chill on my neck, hair standing on end before I turn the final light off and run down the stairs. I know weird, right? Maybe I'm just being superstitious. That's what I thought, until one night I talked to my colleagues. We had gathered after a hard night at work around my colleague's house to smoke cigarettes, drink beer, and watch television, reflecting on the busy evening. I piped up telling them how I hated turning the lights off in the ladies' toilets and my routine of the chill on my neck running from the room. They looked at me dumbfounded, stating that they do the exact same thing. This is the first time we'd talked about the matter, and independently between the 3 of us, we found we engaged in the exact same behaviors, and were equally weirded out by this seemingly ordinary restroom. I have tried to do some independent research into this matter. A rumor going around way back when is that the structure that is now a lavatory was once an apartment, and that the woman living there, a long-term resident, had died. I cannot clarify this as it's been a while since I heard this story. I can't remember who told me. I asked my boss if he'd ever seen anything, but informed me that in his 30-plus years on the property, he had never encountered anything abnormal. There is a picture of a woman in the adjoining function room, but my employers are not sure who it is a picture of. It may just be a junk picture acquired from a charity shop. Furthermore, we have had some odd incidents over the years concerning this room. Disregarding my sheepishness about this toilet, there are several occurrences from hotel visitors that have arisen over the years. The first is fairly innocuous. In the middle of a busy shift, I received a phone call on the business line from a lady who claimed to have stayed in the building a few days prior. She said she had encountered some odd things during her stay and wanted to know if the building was haunted. I was very busy at the time and didn't have any time to chat about it. I informed her I did not know and hung up. On another occasion, we had another lady claiming to be a psychic stating there was a presence in the lavatory. She gave the reason that I and my other male co-workers felt uncomfortable in that place because it was a female space, and that the being that resided there did not approve of us entering. Finally, we had an incident of a woman visiting the bathroom. She went upstairs for around 40 minutes. Then there was a large thudding sound, as if someone had fallen over. She came down distraught. I asked what was wrong. She told me that she had exited a cubicle, having done her business, to find herself in pitch dark. She wouldn't say anything more on the matter and was visibly shaken. So that's about it, really. I find myself in an odd position, as I do not believe in ghosts, but cannot deny that the ladies' toilets in my place of work are indeed haunted. I cannot rationalize this, but something creepy is going on in this old business. I'll tell you this, my colleagues and I avoid this area when we can. It is an unnerving place to enter, especially late at night when you're all alone. That's a wrap for today's episode. Let me know in the comments which story resonated with you the most. If you enjoyed, please give a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories. Catch you in the next episode.